Welcome back to ConversionWorld 2016. We're live streaming from Utrecht in the Netherlands. And quickly moving on to the next talk, we've got Martijn Schäbele joining us to talk about, so you've set up your A/B testing, and now what? Now
Cool.
what, Martijn?
Thanks, man.
Welcome.
And you pronounced my name quite correctly.
It's good.
That's a new thing, yeah. I've got to get used to that. So thanks a lot. Thanks for being around. Thanks for the audience for being here. I'm going to talk in the next, hopefully, 20 minutes about, okay, you set up your program now, your A/B testing program, so now what? So I'm Martijn. I'm the marketing director at The Next Web. I'm the former lead of SEO and analytics, so I have a very fancy title these days, but at least I can share some experience from my background as the guy who was also running our CRO efforts. I work for the best company in Amsterdam, of course, The Next Web. We're a global company and we're mostly well known for our tech and media efforts. So we're very well known from thenextweb.com, where we reach around 7 million unique users on a monthly basis. We host the Next Web conferences in New York and Amsterdam, and we do index.co, which is our technology company database. And with our friends from Google, KPMG, ABN, ACE, and Booking.com, we're going to open an office in, I think, about 4 months, where we'll have 6,000 square meters of cool space for tech enthusiasts. A little bit more, I wanted to show this slide in particular because it really highlights like the funnel that we look at for our A/B testing efforts. So usually our users start at thenextweb.com, which is like our media platform. And then they go on to like our events, intelligence efforts, and then hopefully at one point, but it also depends, of course, if you live in the Netherlands, you end up at TQ, and that's just really like our funnel. So it's an infinite loop of users that we would like you to flow through. But in this presentation, I'm going to talk about more, okay, what kind of data sources do you already have, and what kind of efforts are you already putting into your testing program, and how can you advance that to the next level to really use it like for a next step in your testing efforts. And of course, we're going to talk about how you can use the information I will give you in the presentation to your advantage. So what did we do and how did we get to a bigger program for testing? Because about just over a year ago, we were around doing 1 test a month, and then eventually we scaled up to around 20 tests on a monthly basis. So for us, it was really about improving our conversion rates and making sure that, of course, more people convert, but also that we tested higher velocity. So some figures for testing on how we did in 2014. So we had a CRO team of 0 people in 2014. Luckily, we could scale that up to 2.5 FTE in 2015. And in total, we ran around 38 million sessions in 2015 of people who were running, that were doing a test on. Actually, that was only around 35%, so we could have scaled this up 3 times even. Well, only with 2.5 FTE, that was quite a hard thing to do. So we were eventually able to run around 5 to max 7 tests on a weekly basis. And of course, the amounts of fun we had were priceless to us. A little bit more about our marketing team structure these days. So we got 2 people working on CRO and analytics. And I want to give a quick mention about the front-end developers that we have as well. Because they're quite an important step into the process on how we do testing. But also because if you scale up and go to higher velocity testing, it makes it really worth it to have front-end developers because you're going to do more advanced stuff. And of course, really the process for us and where we started was focusing on continuous improvement. Because we wanted to focus on a more personalized experience, and that's what I'm going to touch on later in the presentation as well, is that it's really about connecting the dots together around your audiences. So really some takeaways on what we learned in the first year on that we really scaled up and focused on high velocity testing is that we needed the right team structures. So that's why I just mentioned having the front-end developers on our team, but also having access to top level. I could do a whole presentation on how important it could be to really communicate the right things in your company. Because these days we have direct access to our CEO, who is always involved in our testing process. You will have trouble as well, of course, in the process because nobody's going to be perfect. And we tried to focus always on innovation because we wanted to do high velocity testing. We always wanted to make sure that we were inventing the wheel twice sometimes, but still came up with improvements in the process. And that really led us to like, okay, what does the current status look like of our presentation and the setup there? Hopefully you've seen this movie. It's Moneyball, made famous by Brad Pitt playing Billy. And a great quote from the Moneyball movie is like, you do the things you always did, but the results is somehow different. And that's really what leads back to the innovation part. We always try to do the same thing over and over again, but at some point it needs to be more efficient. This also leads back to, of course, the opening slide where there was already a background picture of Obama. I'm a huge fan of the way they do campaigning these days and how they did their campaigns in 2008 and 2012. And he really mentioned like, okay, Obama's political moneyball could be the shape of campaigns to come. And the last quote that also leads back in some ways already to conversion rate optimization is the famous example by Target, the US supermarket chain, who figured out that a teen girl was pregnant before her father did. And obviously, how does this kind of help you, you probably wonder. Well, it's probably pretty close to where you should end up with CRO. Because in the end, it's going to tell you more about what are the things that really can drive more conversions and more traffic, and to what extent do I need to work on my micro segments to really get the user a better personalized experience. But how do you really get there? So when we were improving our process, we were really focused on like, okay, what does our stack look like of tools that we're using for optimization and what kind of things that we're doing. So these days we're working with Google Analytics Premium, MailChimp, A/B testing through Google Tag Manager, and we're doing some heat map tracking on our own. And this really provides us with a lot of data. And what they all have in common is that they provide us with a user ID. And because of the user ID, we can more easily connect the data together. And that makes it really that we can combine the data sets to make sure that we can provide a better overview of what the user is interested in, but also what they're doing in other platforms that we might not always have Google Analytics data for. For example, in MailChimp and the emails that we send them. So how do you use it probably? Okay, you're using Google Analytics to say, okay, yesterday was our best day ever. Or MailChimp like, okay, this mail was pretty bad and 15 people had to unsubscribe. Or your heat map tracking, like famously saying that your people read within the F word or whatever. But how you should be using it probably is saying, okay, the returning iPhone users from India show an increase in engagement of 15% because we changed the color from red to blue or whatever. And also saying for your A/B testing, like, okay, what is that new segment about and how is it influencing our testing, and how can we at some point say, okay, this girl might become pregnant in the next 2 weeks because she's buying a certain product more than she used to. And that makes it really different on how the basic setup is look like. Okay, you're testing maybe on your mobile users, you're testing on your desktop users, but probably what you should be going towards is more like, okay, combining these sets of users. So how did it really help the next web? This was a test that we did, I think around 6 months ago now already, and we were focused on, okay, we saw a lot of publishers working towards sharing stuff on WhatsApp. So people were able to share the article directly from their mobile phone to WhatsApp because WhatsApp released a new kind of a button. And USA Today was one of the first publishers in the world to really report like, okay, we saw an increase of 18% of our sharing buttons going up when we started adding WhatsApp to it. And we were like, okay, we probably 18%, well, I would like that uplift as well. So what if we would only target like these users that were focused on sharing or being able to share through WhatsApp the content on the next web? But the first test results really sucked, to be honest. Like, okay, we added the share button for WhatsApp, I think in third place along the other share buttons for LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And we saw a decrease in clicks of over 20%. So we were like, okay, if USA Today is gonna see like an increase in clicks, why are we seeing a decrease like the opposite? And what we tried to do was like, okay, we always try to iterate and see what's going on. And the second test result really showed that when we put it in another place, that we were getting an increase. So this is also a good thing to both really keep on testing, but also focus really on making sure that you test on very specific users. So in this case, we tested on users that had the right phone to share stuff with WhatsApp. So I think in our case, it was only iPhone users, Android users, at a certain version of Android, and users that we were very sure of that they had WhatsApp on their phones. So this really brings you back to a more personalized experience, right? But how can you as a user or you as a CRO guy focus on making sure that you segment your users in a better way? Because in our case, it was like really defining the next steps, and it was really creating more narrowly defined segments. But in that case, we needed really to make sure that our audience size was, of course, at least a couple thousand users, or of course tens of thousands probably, because otherwise you reach the problems that you're not going to get significant data, because otherwise you end up running your tests for months and months, and you're probably not going to improve. And you really want to test on these users to see what is their difference in their behavior. So how can you do that? Well, it's very easy, of course. You already have your GA data, whatever kind of other web analytics tool you might be using. So you already have access to it, and you're probably already doing this, but you're not accepting the fact that you could also apply this to your testing. So if you've done this already and checked like, okay, you might have your mobile users, you might have your desktop users, you could also start combining these sets. Because you already know this data and what could possibly go wrong. And in our case, we really started to take that even to the next level. So our friends at Shutterstock released, I think, an open source code a couple of years ago that really saved all the data they had on the user at the right moment. Mostly so they could build their own heat maps based on whatever kind of action that was performed on the page. So that's what we copy-pasted as well, and we started saving the data, and we really got our own heat maps for almost for free, because the cost of running a server were way less than having access to another tool that could do the same job. And because it also provides us with our raw data sets, we could be able to combine these data sets with our sets that we already have out there. So in our case, we started with using one argument, and then we're going to take it to the next level. So right now we're testing on certain regions, combined already with certain devices, and we're taking this to the next step with combining like certain traffic sources, making share buttons for Facebook more obvious when you're already on Facebook, or if we already know the user. Because it feels pretty stupid that we still need to ask for an email address if we already have one for you. So that's the next step for us, and we're now trying to combine them. So what's next after you've already done this? In our case, it really means that we're starting to save the same data in the same location. We're probably going to move a lot of data to our BigQuery setups, and we're going to make the data, because of that, more accessible to the rest of the team, because it's pretty hardcore to save all your data there. And it also makes it easier to visualize the data at some point, for example, through a solution like Tableau. And of course, we're huge data geeks, so we always want to have biggest data. So really the takeaways in here are like, okay, you need to start creating more segments for your users. Make sure you always have a user ID, definitely if you're like in B2B or really B2C focused with like signups or logins of users, because then you can connect at some point all the data back to a specific user. Obviously always be testing and focus on creating what the future would like to see, both in terms of innovation in your own setup, but also what the user might want to be able to see in a couple of months from now or in a couple of years from now. So you can already test their assumptions. How do you really get there? The user ID is your best friend. Get to know your audience really, really well. Data warehouse, whatever is the term, just use the data and make sure it's in there. And don't be afraid to do this in-house. We love doing this kind of stuff all in-house. And we barely use any agencies for any work. And I hope we have some time for Q&A if I'm not running out of time.
Nothing at the moment, but they can get you on the Slack.
Sure, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, great. So thank you, Martijn, for your talk
Thanks
today, and yeah, we'll speak to you in the Slack channel.
Cool.
Then.
Cool. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so